I'll do a review of Likutei Sichas in volume 16, Chelek Tazayin. This is the third sicha for the Parshas Tisa. Over here, the Rebbe explains a Rashi sicha, and the Rebbe goes into the details of the meaning that Rashi explains. Loma Hashem yechra abcho ba'amecha, and what the meaning of it is, and as Rashi is explained elsewhere, why Rashi doesn't use a different explanation. The Rebbe explains a whole lot of details about the idea of why Hashem is bothered, so to speak, by Avodah Zorah, or those who worship Avodah Zorah. And the Rebbe at the end of the sicha is going to bring out the Pnimiyus HaInyonim that a Yid actually is never fully worshiping Avodah Zorah because his mind is always elsewhere. We'll see inside. So let's look inside. Aleph. In the pasuk, Vayichal Moshe Pnei Hashem Elikov, Vayomer. So Moshe was beseeching and praying to Hashem, his God. And what did he say? Loma Hashem yechra abcha ba'amecha v'goymer. Why, Hashem, does your anger flare at your Jewish people, at your people? Is Rashi mefarish diverted Loma Hashem v'goymer? Rashi explains, he's saying, why, Hashem, should you be angry? Why should your anger flare? Rashi explains, why not? I mean, the Yidden did such a sin. So Rashi explains, Klum miskane elachocham bechocham, giber begiber. There can only be a jealousy, a competition between one wise person with another wise person, or a strong person and another strong person. But basically, since the Avodah Zorah is nothing, why would Hashem be angry on something which is nothing? It's not another Chacham, it's not another giver, it's not a counter to Hashem. So why is Hashem angry? So bepashtus. So on the simple level, is the Rashi oisen tzubavorna and bipirushay. So Rashi's intent here is to explain with his commentary, as the Meforshim explain. Since the Jews violated such a very serious sin, Avodah Zorah, which is the Chet HaEgel, idol worship, which is the sin of the calf, is the Chmuvan for was is given the Charen Af. So it's understood why there was the anger of Hashem. It was frekt Moshe Rabbeinu. So why is Moshe Rabbeinu asking, Loma Hashem yechra abcha ba'amecha? Why Hashem should your anger flare against your people? What kind of a question is that? They did a sin, Hashem is angry. So leave there to me. So that's because of this wonder, this problem. So take other commentators of the Torah say, as their main from Loma over here, the meaning of the word Loma is not farvos. It's not why, nor loy. It means no. There's haste. Moshe had gebeten by the Meibishten that Moshe has asked by Hashem, Al yechra abcha ba'amecha. Let your anger not flare. So it's not asking why, but to say no. Rashi, however, was his mefarish pshuta shel mikra. He explains the simple meaning of the verse. He translates over here the word lama literally, which means farvos. Why? So basically, Rashi learns that Moshe Rabbeinu was saying, why Hashem? So what is the explanation? The Rebbe is Rashi mefarish as the Tamataina. That's where Rashi explains. So what is the reason of Moshe Rabbeinu's argument? Loma Hashem yechra apecha. Why should Hashem your anger flare? Is while because there's only a jealousy between the one chacham against another chacham, or strong, mighty person against another mighty person. But you, Hashem, have no reason to get angry over the Avodah Zarah. Okay, so that's the way the Meforshim explain that this is Rashi's intent. But the Rebbe is going to give us a whole different explanation later on. But first, the Rebbe challenges this explanation because Mendarfo beverstein, not this concept, but this whole Rashi's giving a reason. Lama Hashem Yechere Abcha, that Moshe Rabbeinu was arguing this argument. Rashi has already mentioned another argument that Moshe had, and saying that B'chlal the tzivui of Anoich Hashem Elokecha was said in a singular way just to Moshe Rabbeinu, and Hashem never told the Yidden that they shouldn't have Avodah Zarah. It didn't say Lo Yeh Lachem. It says Lo Yeh Lacha. It was all talking to Moshe Rabbeinu. So how come Rashi doesn't use this as the argument of Moshe Al Yechra? Let's look inside. We need to ever understand the Rashi Yodoch Masber given in Parshas Yisrei. The section of Yisrei, Rashi explained. As der Tam was der Eibishter had gesagt, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Why did Hashem said, I am God, your God, in a singular way, like speaking to Moshe? Loshen Yochid, individually, is Kidei Litin Pischem Pel Moshe, Lilamed Sanigoria B'Maisa Egel. This is to give Moshe an opening of an argument, an opening of his mouth to say, for Moshe to find a defense, a Sanigoria B'Maisa Egel, on the act of the Egel. This is what Moshe Rabbeinu said to Hashem. Lama Hashem Yechere Abcha Ba'amecha. Why are you Hashem? Why is your anger flare against your people? Leilahem Tzivisa, Lo Yeh Lachem Elikim Achedim. You didn't tell them, should not be Lachem in a plural, Elikim Achedim. Elali Levadi, you have just told me not to. Lo Yeh Lacha. So Rashi clearly said that this was the argument that Moshe Rabbeinu used to Hashem when he says, Lama Hashem Yechre Abcha Ba'amecha, was that the Jews were never commanded not to have Elikim Achedim. And that was his argument, Lama Kim Yechre Ba'abcha Ba'amecha. Why are your people against, but it's me that you told? Why does Rashi searching over here for a different explanation of Moshe Rabbeinu's time and Moshe Rabbeinu's argument? Rashi says over here, why Hashem are you angry? Rashi says because Chacham is angry, Miskana, Gibber Begibber, but not the Eibishter against Avodah Zarah. But why not use already? But Rashi already said that means Lo Yeh Lacha was said in a singular, and so Moshe Rabbeinu can say Lo Hashem Yechre Abcha Ba'amecha, that Hashem did not tell them. So it says, you can't say, as Rashi made to Mefarer Zayin, the Pasuk Leit Beide Hasboros. Maybe Rashi really means both explanations. The explanation that he says in Parshas Yisrei, and the explanation that he says here. And Rashi is just relying on what he said over there as one explanation. There's another explanation. When the Brengdor need the Hasbara from Parshas Yisrei, he doesn't bring here the explanation of the portion of Yisrei, of the portion of Yisrei, the far, for the reason why Hashem is up free, because he already said this earlier. The Rebbe says, it's not really logical. It doesn't really sit well that Rashi is all done Parshasenu in our Parsha by Mokara Inyan, where is the source of the pasuk and the source of the subject. In Ganzani Damon and the Pirish, he shouldn't even mention that interpretation. I feel a bit kitzur b'loshen even short in a like there's another interpretation very similar to that. And he should lie of them was mefarish given b'derech agav shleim. Something that he explained it by the way, and not in the place in Parshas Yisrei. But there, Rashi explained it by the way. So Rashi doesn't even mention it and just totally relies on it. Especially the Rebbe said that Yenas Bori is Ashtarkina. That's a stronger one because he's showing Gans not time at Sweden. that rejects any complaint to the Yidden at all. Nit nor charein avos come to miskane. That over here is saying, why are you miskane? Because miskane is not fitting because they're chacham b'chacham, gibber b'gibber, and Hashem has no reason to be miskane. Over there, you're rejecting by saying Hashem didn't tell you. There's no reason even to have a complaint against the Yidden. Hashem never told them not to worship idols. Nit nor charein avos come to miskane. Not only Lomo Hashem Yechara Pecha, that we're only saying Yichar. We should say even more than that. And that argument is that there is no tiny in at all. So therefore, the Rebbe says Musman Zogan. We have to say as the Tzvei Perushim for Rashi, Zayin Mavayir Tzvei Pezunder in Yonim Kid will come on. That these two interpretations of Rashi, they're basically explaining two separate aspects, as the Rebbe will explain later on. So Rashi here is explaining more in this pasuk right here. Over there, it gives you a general explanation, as the Rebbe will explain. The Rebbe further asks in Ois Beis, why does Rashi choose to say miskane chacham b'chacham, as if that the issue is here that the miskane applies to the Avodah Zarah? Seems to be very disrespectful that the Avodah Zarah itself versus saying, why is Hashem getting angry, miskane, on the Avodah Zarah? Let's look inside. Based. Further, we have to understand from Pashtus, Loshen Rashi, from the simple language that Rashi uses, is there then a jealousy, an anger, only between two chacham, one chacham, another chacham, gibber begibber, is move on. So from this language understood as the inyan from miskane, who is the jealousy, who is the anger directed, is b'shayches, is in connection to the Avodah Zarah Gufa, that it's the idol itself that they're worshiping. To speak to Hashem, why are you getting jealous or angry on a Avodah Zarah, which is really nothing? That's being disrespectful. It's hepech hakoved. It's not disrespectful. Nochmer. Furthermore, we find actually that in the Gemara, the Taina klum miskane v'chulu, is the kashe v'sagrifas agoy od gefek Rabbi Gamliel. That was a question that he asked him. It says in the pasuk, if them was der Eibishter wird angerufen kil Kana, Shem is referred to as the God of Kana, of anger, of revenge, and Agrifas, who is not Jewish, challenged Rabbi Gamliel, and he said, "Klum miskana, why is Hashem Kana for Avodah Zarah, which is really nothing? Chacham b'chacham, gibber b'gibber, but not against Avodah Zarah." Und Rabbi Gamliel did answered with a marshal. So what he responded with an example, as the miskane is not in the Avodah Zarah, nor in the Avodah Zarah, that the anger of Hashem is not with the Avodah Zarah, which is really of no consequences, no merit to it, nor in the Avodah Zarah. Hashem is angry on those who worship the Avodah Zarah. So that's what Rabbi Gamliel answers the guy. So here, Moshe Rabbeinu is saying this to Hashem. Let's say that Rashi has something that forces him to say, as klum miskane v'chulu, is given the Teuch Matayres Moshe, that this was the content of Moshe's argument. As Rashi explains, we have this idea. Why does Rashi, however, learn that this was with regards to the Avodah Zarah itself, with the Kasha Nalfon Agrifas? As Agrifas asked, that was Moshe Rabbeinu, that's what Agrifas asked. Medrash, why doesn't he use the Medrash? Alasar, right here, the Medrash tied to is the Taina for Moshe, that it translates the argument of Moshe. Omar, he says, Riboin Hoilom. So Moshe said to the Abish, the master of the world, Asul L'chos. They made for you a support. They made the egel. They made a help for Hashem. You're getting angry at them. The egel that they made is going to be a support to you. So Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem said, Moshe, you are also making the same mistake as them. But there is no substance to this egel. How is an egel going to support when there is no substance? Hashem said to him, why are you angry on your children? So here, very specifically, but this is, first of all, mer aloshen shel kavod. It's more respectful, rather than saying why getting angry on avodah zarah. The avodah zarah is and avodah miskane and avodah zarah. It's aloshen shel kavod. It's more honorable, and based in them is mudgesh nor der kas aleim albonecha. Over here, the emphasis is not the anger. Hashem's anger is on the avodah zarah itself, but it's on the children. And that makes a lot more respectful, and it's a lot more easier than saying klum iskana on the avodah zarah itself. And number two, Moshe Rabbeinu saying to Hashem, why is Hashem getting angry? And we don't find that Hashem gives an answer to that. So then one can conclude, so what's the problem with avodah zarah? Avodah zarah isn't really doing anything because it's of no value. Since on the argument from Moshe to Hashem, it only gets jealousy and anger of a chacham and a chacham giber. Okay, an answer we don't find in the simple pasuk. In the literal level of the Chumash, an answer is ditlatik, so it's not so smooth. What is the shturim for Isur avodah zarah? What's the big storm, the big to-do about the prohibition of avodah zarah? Shouldn't be shouldn't do from the Seres HaDibros. You're not doing it there. No, they have no existence. They are really no entity. So therefore, big deal. Who cares, basically? And that was Moshe Rabbeinu's argument. There's no answer to that, so that means that it's true that there is no entity to them, and there's no reason to get angry with them. So why is there such great prohibitions? Further, Is Gimel, the Rebbe says, "Oiches nit move on." Also not understood. Rashi uses two examples. Favos sagt Rashi die zwei Inyonim, klum is kane ela chacham b'chacham, giber b'giber. Is chacham b'chacham and giber b'giber. I can nicht sagen, ados is der far, was azay is der loshen in pasuk. Maybe Rashi just uses these two things, chacham b'chacham, giber b'giber, because the loshen in pasuk. Pasuk says, al yishalel chacham b'chacham, giber b'giber. So the Torah, the pasuk uses the language, chacham with his wisdom, and giber with his good. Don't praise yourself. So the Sipur Hanal, the Rebbe is referring to the story brought down from Rabbi Gamliel. So over there too, he uses the two examples of a chacham, and giber b'gevurasei. Because Aleph, while Aleph in Posuk or in their Sipur Hanal is Doich Adritrinyan. Because both in the Posuk and also in the story with Rabbi Akiva, there is, with Agrifas, over there is a third matter, and there it says Oshir Ba'oshrei, or Ba'oshir, Al Yisrael in the Posuk, or there's Ba'oshir. Rashi is just Mashmit, and Rashi does not bring that down. So if Rashi is bringing down just because the pasuk brings down, so you shouldn't bring down the Osher too. Base number two, Kidu Banutz Rashi Akefu Barichas. Rashi uses a duplication or at length, generally dafke when ze beide, when both of them oder dariches, or when it's a lengthy, seine negeye zum perush in which they are connected to the meaning of the simple meaning of the verses. So need the far, and not because is the loshni posik in Maimor Razal. That's the language in Maimor Razal. That's not the Rashi style. Rashi doesn't bring it just because it's Maimor Razal. Darf man verstehen, so we have to understand what are these two aspects, Oshir ba'Oshir, and Giber b'Gvurosei, and they're important. And I mean, Chacham b'Chachmosei, Giber b'Gvurosei, Giber b'Giber, Chacham b'Chacham, but not the idea of Oshir. Rashi doesn't mention because these two aspects are important. And the Rebbe explains in Ois Daled that actually what the issue over here is the severity. Moshe Rabbeinu, Rashi is coming to explain, Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't asking why they deserve Misa, because we know that. Moshe Rabbeinu was asking, why is there a Charen Af which brings about such a tremendous punishment? All Jews immediately, and we know that that's not usually the process in which, even when a person deserves Misa, and even there's a process. So it has to do with the Charain Af. Rashi is coming to answer, what was God so angry about over here that caused this severe punishment? Dalet. That's Rashi trying to explain over here. The Biur Paseh. That Hechrech from Rashi of Zayin Pirush, Klum Eskana V'chulu. What is Rashi's proof that forces Rashi to explain that his Klum Eskana is from them was a diverter Loma Hashem V'goimer, that on these words, there's various different, there's other prints that have the heading as Loma Hashem Yecher Apecha, but said is maitik is nidglatik. These words, something is not smooth over here. Problem Rashi has, why is Moshe Rabbeinu asking about why is Hashem angry? He should first say, why Hashem just don't destroy? There's an emphasis here on the anger. After Hashem said to Moshe, let me, and I will, my anger will flare them, and then I'll destroy them. Moshe, he first should have taken care or protected from Hashem shouldn't destroy them. He should have argued, why Hashem should you destroy, or similar to it? And then later he'll say, maybe let your why should your anger flow? But in actuality, first he starts saying, why Hashem you angry? And then he goes against, why do you destroy them? So why that's bothering them. And the explanation is that Moshe Rabbeinu Taka didn't have a question why Hashem Bechlal is punishing them, but he wanted to know, why is Hashem angry that it brings about the Chaloisa? For the fact that they are liable for Misa because they worship the Egel, is by Moshe Rabbeinu Kinkashin given. That wasn't the problem by Moshe. As Teichem Frir in the Torah, it already says earlier in the Torah, as a Zayin and Dokama Vakama Avedis, that there are many and many Avedis for which a person deserves the punishment of death, God forbid. There's no argument and no surprise. Why is there such a punishment? The Tam Defun is moving passion. We know the reason why there's no question to that. For a harbor Aveda, come to harbor Einish, for a very serious sin comes a very serious punishment. Misa Rahman al-Islam. Death, God forbid. To me, but what is the Moshe's question here? That is how the punishment is being meted out, how the punishment is taken. Achalim is destroyed and was muzayin verbunden mit asim b'yichedes. That must come because there was something, specific reason that brings about this type of punishment. She's a klal in Torah, generally like this. First of all, there's a rule in Torah, as the chiyuv va'onish misa can zayin, that when could there be an obligation, a punishment of death? Only dafke, only in the case when zani given edus, when there's witnesses. Noch dem is given asra. There was first a warning, and then there is witnesses. Unoch der chakiru drisha from Bezdin, and after Bezdin investigates and seeks out the witnesses, I feel even that's the way it should take place. I feel when Torah zogdem loshen, even when Torah says a language, mechashefa lo yisachaye. Don't let a mechashefa, a woman sorcerer, live. So if you read it simply, as metorni the laws in the mechashefa is 11, yet you're not allowed to allow for this woman sorcerer to live. But Rashi, and Rashi cautions you immediately and says that does make it that you have to go and kill every machashefa. What's mizet? As soon as you see you're going to kill Ella, to must be Bezdin. She has to be brought to Bezdin. So in other words, there's a process. Even when the Torah said there is a process. Furthermore, even more, even by the first sin, the sin of the tree of knowledge. In the Azhora zum Adam Rishon, Hashem told him very clearly when he warned the Adam Rishon, he told him, don't eat from it. In the day that you eat from it, you will die. Yet we see, as Adam Rishon for sein over sein, that Adam Rishon for violating the he wasn't punished with the punishment of death, and to give him misa immediately. Nor erst noch dem was had gelebt 930 years. He lived after he lived 930 years. That's when he died. That was the punishment. So compare that to what's taking place over here. Hashem says, "Let me go. I'll destroy them." Which means like this: that einish is misa, the punishment is death. And immediately after the sin, and furthermore it says which means made alayim. All Jews will be destroyed. Also those who did not worship to the golden calf. We also can understand that this was going to happen, as we see in the following discussion. It says Hashem says, I'll make you into a great people. As Rashi explains, that Moshe Rabbeinu was saying, if a chair that has 3 legs, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov cannot stand, and you're going to destroy the Yidden, at the time that you get angry, so how much more so for it? Or if you have a chair made of 1 leg, just Moshe Rabbeinu, how am I going to stand? So you see clearly that there's going to be nobody else besides Moshe Rabbeinu, the new generation. So why is there such a kind of a punishment? That cannot be just for the sin. It says, my anger will flay. That brings about the series of the punishment. More than it comes for the Aveda itself. So the reason there is such a great, severe punishment, achalim, everybody, immediately, punishment, moves, death, that must be that there is an anger, something special. Das is given type of Moshe. And that was Moshe Rabbeinu's argument. Lo Hashem yechra pecho. Why is there this anger? In other words, like this. So los sich verstehen. It's something which we can understand. Why is there a serious punishment for the sin of Avodah Zarah? Ubefrat as those dinan elakim achedim, especially this whole idea of worshiping the other gods, hotkin ordnit in seichel, there has no room in one's intellect. It makes no sense. To think that there's some substance to that, worshiping it. So if somebody does such a foolish thing, and on top of that, it's also not in the emotions. You're not attracted to want it. To have a desire that you want to worship with a desire. The Rashi's Freire Mefarish, as Rashi explained earlier, they are not godly, but others made them gods upon them. Is b'meila move on. So therefore, it's understood as farazachet kumt an einish chamor. So that was this question for such a sin, doing such a foolishness, whether it doesn't make sense logically, it doesn't make sense emotionally, and they're going to worship the Avodah Zarah. It's not a question why they deserve punishment. But from them was the Rebbe but the fact that the Rebbe says, I will destroy them, which includes these 3 points. Aleph on Beis Din, there is no court. Beis taken from Yad immediately. And 3, Gimel, Alayid, everybody is the Chmuchach. So that's evidence from that, as das Izan Einish, that this is a punishment for Ser Nit Nor Mitzad. It doesn't come just because Ubehesem and Firig, Zum Chet for the Egel, to the sin of those who worship the Egel. But this is Mitzad Acharein Af. This is a anger of Hashem. The Shaykhis to the Avodah Zarah Gufa, as it relates to the Avodah Zarah itself. It's not for the Aveda that the people that violated it, but it's something that has to do with the Avodah Zarah itself. And the Rebbe wrote Moshe getainet. That's why Moshe argued, Lo ma Hashem yechere apecho. The Avodah Zarah itself, what is your anger flaring? Mitzadem Egel Azov. If you talk about the golden calf, Klum miskane l'chochem b'chochem. A person, one who's only jealous is the other one. The Egel is doch kein Metzius nit, since it's a non-entity. Adozol gedim zayin miskane, that this should cause that anger, that jealousy, that charein av, that anger in the Avodah Zarah. Und das soll herausrufen dem Einish v'achalim, that this should bring out the achalim. If alle Yidden take from Yad, why would this? Because this is not just the anger of those who worship the Avodah Zarah. This is something unique. Hey, Oisap, is move on. Based on this is understood. Favos Rashi bring the Nishdan Pirush v'sezok in Parshas Yisrael. Why Rashi doesn't bring here the commentary, the interpretation that it says in Parshas Yisrael. Over there, he said that what was the argument of Lo Hashem Yechre? That that's the reason why. That's why, because Hashem, he said that Hashem only told Moshe. But the reason why Hashem said Anoicha Hashem lekecha in the Lashon Yochid to Moshe, litem pischem pel Moshe, and to give an opening of a mouth, an argument for Moshe. So he was saying that this you didn't command them. So this is the meaning of when Amecha didn't hear. It was not for them that Hashem said Lo Yilecha. Rashi doesn't bring it over here. Dort is Rashi mefarish that Goshe of Moshe's Taina. Over there, Rashi explains the emphasis of Moshe's argument. Pirush versus Negeya Dort ala Sanfun Tzivur, according to the interpretation, which is important over there, on the place where the command was given, where Hashem says, over there, Rashi says, please compare. There is an excuse, there's an opening of a mouth, there is a rationalization, that even those who worship the Egel, Rashi says over there, would have a reason. Moshe Rabbeinu is saying there's a reason to excuse them. That they are not liable at all for any punishment. For the command, there should not be any other God. So that is true. But when we read the simple meaning of the pasuk over here, when we relate the entire story, is muchal from the Mloshen. So it's evident from the language. Loma Hashem yechra pecha, as the Rebbe was explaining. Over here, the issue is God's anger is flaring, that this is where the issue is here. As the time is not even it's not the argument on the punishment why the Oivdei Egel deserve a punishment. Not even Indian from Yechra Apecha, but on the matter of why is Hashem's anger. So it's the Avodah Zarah itself. Baruch as explained earlier, Baruch. Therefore, it changes what the emphasis is. So when we talk about by the Tzivui, we're saying they didn't have an excuse for that too. But here, in the context of the pasuk, we see that it has to do with the Avodah Zarah itself. So he says, Lama Hashem Yechra. Vov. So now the Rebbe says, Apizeh is oich move on. We also understand was Rashi Zogdo the Tzvein Yonim. The Rashi says both matters, Chocham bechocham and Gibber begibber. When the Eibishter's dibur zu Moshe, in the Eibishter's dibur zu Moshe, because when Hashem says to Moshe, Leich reid, kishiches amcho gomer, go descend because your people have corrupted. But gesagt, Hashem said to him, sorry mahir min haderech, they very quickly turned away from the path. Asher tzivisim, that I have instructed them. Also lahem egel masecha, they made to them a molten calf. And they bowed to it. They slaughtered him. And they said, this is your God, Israel, that brought you up Eretz Mitzrayim. So long details telling them what they said. Hashem is saying to Moshe that they said, this is your God that take you up from Mitzrayim. Why is that important? Exactly what they said. Although the Yidden said it. Why does the pasuk bring that down? Why is it important to the talking about how grave the sin is? They made an egel masech, they bowed to it, they slaughtered to it. As the that at the time they also said, this is your God who brought you up from Egypt. What does that change so much? We also find in Moshe's argument to Hashem, why should you be angry with your people? And as a first what the pasuk says, so he says, you have taken them out of the land of Egypt with great strength and with a strong arm. So you see somehow that there is an issue over here that really Hashem has taken them out from the and they said, and for them, so we see from this proves to us as the Charen Af, the Inyan from Miskane, the anger of Hashem, the idea of Miskane, that also had connected to what they said. So the Eibishter is mentioning it. That's why the pasuk brings it down. That the anger was, they said, this is the Elkech Yisrael that brought up from Mitzrayim. Und of them is given Tainas Moshe. Klum Miskane. Why are you angry? In other words, to bring them up from Mitzrayim, there needs to be Chochma and Gevura. And that seems to make Hashem Miskane upset, because the pasuk mentions it to Moshe on the Har, and the pasuk says that, and Moshe says, Asher Yitzei Mitzrayim, seems like. So these are the two qualities that takes to take them out of Mitzrayim. Babir, if Tzairois fit in the Eden from Mitzrayim, in order to lead the Jewish people out of Egypt, and to lead them in the desert, they require two things. Chochma and Gevura, wisdom and strength. Aber nicht token hechrech von Ashirus. Aber we don't require, but nicht Ashirus, we don't require Ashirus for that. This is moving. As understood. As the protein from Yitzias Mitzrayim, details of the exodus of Egypt, with the nisim and the flaws, the miracles, the wonders. They were tied to great wisdom. How to accomplish it. It took a lot of strength by durchfiren lepoil to accomplish in actuality. And so these are the two aspects of Chachma and Gvura. Further, even more, what were they seeking help? What do they want? They didn't look for wealth. Because as Rashi has already notified, they had a tremendous wealth from business Mitzrayim, from the spoil of Egypt, and from business Hayam, and even more from the spoil of the ocean. Those what Moshe Rabbeinu gesagt, and this is what Moshe Rabbeinu said. Why is your anger flaring? The miskane, the anger of the egel, there's no logic for being angry at the egel. Warum klum miskane lechochem lechochem gibe begiber is then anger a chochem another chochem and gibe begiber. The emes is doch. The truth is, as the Eibishter Hatzaros genommen from Mitzrayim. The Koyach God B'Et Chazaka. The Eibishter is the one Hashem says to Meretz Mitzrayim. The pasuk Koyach God Chazaka. Only the Egel Chazashol, not the Egel God forbid. The Aveda Zora hat doch nicht kein Chachma de Gevura. Has no wisdom or no strength. To be shaykh to miskana zayin in the Aveda Zora. So how can one be angry or jealous on the Aveda Zora? And the Rebbe is basically saying, Rashi has to explain that the Rebbe asked before, it's not so chukovedik, and it's like the argument of Rebbe the Agrifas. But this was the meaning in the pasuk that Moshe Rabbeinu was saying to Hashem that it seems to be that there's a yechra pecho that brings the achalim, and therefore he was saying that this is all seems like it's going against the Avodah Zarah, but Avodah Zarah is no mamoshes. So, notwithstanding it's not the kovedik, notwithstanding that this was Agriffa saying, but over here, this seems to be that this is what Moshe Rabbeinu was saying to Hashem. That's why the Rebbe explains. Zayin, what is the wine of Torah Pirush Rashi? Seems like we still need to understand. Although with regards to the Avodah Zarah, there's really no room to become angry, because only a Chacham and another Chacham Giver will become angry, but not when there's a non-entity. But from the perspective, those who did worship the Egel, and they did say, this is a Lekecha Yisrael, this is your God Israel, Asheluchem Eretz Mitzrayim, that brought you out from Egypt, is doch Lecheira do an ort, so there seems room, Chaz v'sholem for an Inyan from Miskana, Hashem should be angry at them. Kel Kana, a God of Kana, vengeance, in the Evdei Egel, those who worship the Egel. The Baldazim doch gemeint as the Egel is a Chachman Giver. They thought that the Egel is a Chachman Giver, so anger should be in them. So, Enochinami, that there is no Yechra on the Anoachalim, but there's still anger. Is the beer in them? Explanation as a Eid mitzad atzmi hot nit kintos and Avodah Zarah. The truth of the matter is a Yid that himself does not make a mistake in Avodah Zarah. Ervei says, "This is not an Eitz ve'evan." He knows this is merely a stone, a wood, and a stone. When er git nit kishum chashivus Avodah Zarah, he gives no importance to Avodah Zarah. Afilu b'im over zayin of them chet, even when he violates the sin. Or megam b'shas achet, hoysabam noitris barach. Even at the time of the sin, it's still in faithfulness with Hashem. As the saying of the Alter Rebbe. As a Yid can sein abgeris von a lekus, a Yid not wishes to, doesn't want, and not is able to be ripped away, torn from godliness. Those was the Avodah of the Zorah gesagt, and the fact that the idol worshiper said, "Eila lekecha Yisrael, this is your God Israel." Is das nur der Fahar? It's only for the reason was nichnas bei Ruach Shtus. Spirit of foolishness entered him. Und davon kommen as Alcharei. That's how you come. You talk like that. Was a Ruach Shtus is a besondere Sache von der Wieden allein. This is not the Jew. It's something different than the Jew. Nichnas bei enters in him. Nichnas bei Ruach Shtus, but it's not it. Und das ist der Teil von Moshe Lom Hashem Yechra Abcha Ba'amecha. As Rashi explained even in Parshas Yisrael. Why are you angry at your people? Euch mitzad Amecha mitzad Yidden. Darf nicht sein kein Ort of Miskana. There should be no room for anger. Weil mitzad Muhusom, because their essence is by saying ganzen Mushlo, it's totally negated to machshiv sein, to give any important, God forbid, to the Avodah Zorah. Als Chochem, to make it as a wisdom or giver, or strong or mighty. Und der Riber is klum, miskane lechochem, bechochem, a giber begiber. They don't make him. It's not a chochem, not a giber, because they never made him into a chochem. They never made him to a giber because of Mahusay Ba'is Ba'am Ne'itay. So he's never descended that level. Und das hat gepoilt, this impacted, this affected, as we know Hashem Goymer, that Hashem retracted. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Tisa Topshin Lamed Beis.